Well, good evening, everybody. This is a bit of a change from the usual format, which is me doing a video. But tonight we're doing a live stream. I figured it'd be a good opportunity to do some Q&A and talk about some stuff that has been going on with the Great Reset and some things that's been posted on Twitter. Unfortunately for me, because I suck soloing on a stream, I have Alex with me to talk about the Great Reset. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me on, Ian.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining me. Like I said, this would be probably a very short stream if it was just myself, because yeah, sometimes being solo gets kind of awkward. How are you doing tonight? How was your Christmas and your New Year's?
It was fun. I mostly did video game live streams for the holidays. That's how I like to spend my holidays. So like I streamed, was it for New Year's Eve? I streamed The Witcher, the first game, and then I did what did I do on Christmas? I can't quite remember, but I did a bunch of like specialty streams both weeks because that's just how I like to have my fun.
Yep. How are you liking The Witcher so far?
I actually really liked it. I didn't expect myself to. My game was incredibly stable, considering that a lot of people say that game is not all that stable. And
it was initially buggy at first, but I think CD Projekt Red has patched it since then. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's the original one, so it's what was that, 2007? So I mean,
okay.
I would.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the third one. I've never played a Witcher game before.
Gotcha.
Ever. Yeah. So, and I liked the combat in it. I actually liked the system. I thought while it's not typical, I thought it was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. All right. So one of the things that happened while we were all on vacation was that there was a document. I wouldn't say it was leaked. It was published on Twitter. Some people were saying it was leaked. And then there was a bit of damage control that everybody did. If you can go and pull that tweet up, that'd be fantastic. But it basically kind of highlights what's kind of going on with the Great Reset. And I think it was a letter that was from the to the Dutch finance minister. And hang on. That's the damage control one. Let me send you the other one. Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you. And so this came out, and it's really funny because whenever the Great Reset is in the news, they always say, "Oh, it's just this meeting that happens in Davos every year," and which it's not the case, obviously. But that's what they try and push on the normies to, basically kind of like go, "Oh, these conspiracy theorists, they're making it out to be something bigger than it actually is," and it's not. If you pay attention, if you go to the World Economic Forum's website, you would know that this is absolutely not the case. This is an agenda. This is a plan. As they say, they're trying to transform capitalism. And it's not just a meeting. So, the joys of legacy media spinning the narrative, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, though, is that I've seen this kind of thing a lot where they go, "Oh, no, it's not X. It's just the very definition of X."
Mm-hmm.
And that's their way of, and that's kind of like saying, "I think you're stupid, so, and you don't know the definition of the word you're using, so I'm just that's how I'll pass it off." And it's like, even if you don't use the word, like, "Oh, we're trying to restructure capitalism," or whatever, people don't need the words to know that what they're doing is counter to most people's best interests.
Right. And that's one thing that we've been seeing for a number of years now, which is kind of like the redefining of words, right? And which is just absolutely insane. We've seen it throughout the COOF. We've seen it in social justice, where they changed terms like racism, white supremacy, and we're kind of getting here. So the areas that were highlighted here is the discussion will focus on shaping policies for the post-COVID-19 era under the themes of the Great Reset, which is basically the crisis that they've been using to try and push the Great Reset. It has been COVID. Beforehand, they were using climate change. And before that, well, I won't say before that, they've been using that for a while, but they tried using the swine flu too. That happened back in oh God, what was it, like 2009?
Yeah, it was quite a while ago at this point. And yeah, that sounds about the right time to me.
Yeah. And they've had these agendas. You had I think maybe agenda 2015 or 2012. I don't remember. They've had several. They keep pushing it out, right? Because it's not working. They're not getting the buy-in like they've been wanting. So now we have Agenda 2030, which is where they're trying to implement all these things in place for the Great Reset. And this is all stuff you can find on the World Economic Forum's website, which is the stuff that's so funny about it when they go and spin what's going on. So it continues on the highlight areas. Your contribution to the work of the Great Reset will be especially critical at the annual meeting. The forum will work with your staff to ensure that your participation becomes a major force in shaping the Great Reset. Yeah. So, and again, this was sent over to the Dutch finance minister from Klaus Schwab. So, and again, they're saying, go ahead.
I was going to say the really insidious thing about it is the idea of them dictating policy. They would say, we're going to shape policy. And it's like, well, that's counter to democracy, because the people of, whoever is in charge, like whatever state official you're talking about, the people of that state should be the ones driving policy for their state. And so this isn't, whether or not he is even a citizen of the state that he's sending a letter like this to, it wouldn't matter. He shouldn't be shaping policy.
No.
And those two words together, I think, is like one of the things a lot of people need to grab onto, because that is very horrible to self-determined governance.
Well, yeah, and a lot of this is kind of an affront to the democratic process, because you have a bunch of unelected officials that are dictating policy, and that's ultimately what they're trying to get to, is the state where corporations have a seat in government. That was one thing I was listening to, that somebody tagged Unsafe Space on Twitter regarding this one podcast with Glenn Beck, and I listened to part of it, what they were talking about, and for the most part, I agree with what they were being said, but I think Glenn Beck actually had it wrong when he says that basically government's trying to get into all these businesses. I think it's the other way around, because I think that initially when I started learning about the Great Reset, I thought a lot of it was going to be about a push for global socialism and ultimately the end state being communism. And I've since changed my mind on this, and I think what the end state is actually is more corporatism, having corporations help dictate policy, and
yeah, I'd 100% agree with that interpretation. I do not think it's about the government getting involved in corporations so much as corporations taking over governance, or at least driving it for the most part. And one person who really recognizes that is Vivek Ramaswamy. Woke Incorporated, there's huge chunks of chapters about Schwab and what he's planning and the direction of decision making. And it's coming from the corporate side, not from the governance side.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so crazy about it. Yeah, so you see Square Inch is saying corporate neo-feudalism. And when I initially had that discussion with Dr. Reckenwald, that was one he brought up too, was the whole corporate feudalism. And Please says, fascism in a sense. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's what they're pushing towards. It's not communism, but some form of actual fascism between corporations and governments, which is, again, what we've been kind of seeing a push for here in the States with the Build Back Better bill and the infrastructure bill, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it comes down to disguising crony capitalism to get people to be okay with it and thus expand it. Because it's really like the more and more friendly corporations are with the government, the more it is just crony capitalism, whatever name they want to slap on it.
Yeah. Well, this iteration is stakeholder capitalism, which is pretty funny.
Exactly. I know. Yeah. That's the facelift term, essentially. And it's like, well, it's not really, they're pretending to care. And it's not as if corporations haven't done that in the past, or large organizations haven't pretended to care to, slip through a ton of power grabs. That's an old story. The problem is that people are either not aware or they don't care. Those are the two options.
Yeah. There was one thing I thought was pretty funny. Like so me and some friends, we used to go visit Dallas quite a bit, and I'm totally blanking on the suburb, but there's an area in, it's a part of Dallas, and we have like a bunch of corporate headquarters, and then you have like these neighborhoods around them, and that was like the big thing that my friend and I, when we drive through there to go to a friend's place, we were thinking, it's like, wow, it reminded me a lot of feudalism, where you have like the church and then like the village around the church and the castle. And you kind of had a lot of this same kind of setup, where instead of it being a church or the castle, it is a corporate headquarters surrounded by the village, so to speak. And so we made a joke about the whole thing with neo-feudalism. And here we are, this is like well over 20 years later, and we're kind of seeing, we're really kind of pushing for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is, though, is that I don't think it's I don't think it's new. I don't think this is a new thing that corporations would want to do, or business in general. Anyone who like gets to a certain level just wants more. That is like greed. Just it snowballs in human nature. So I don't think this is new. It's just that I think technology is speeding it along and making it easier.
Yes.
So we're seeing it a lot more, because as more things get automated, it's easier for someone to pull the levers of that automation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that really kind of bothers me, is that my because of my background in technology, automation has been something I've worked a lot in. And the whole selling point behind automation is it's supposed to free you up to do other things, which is kind of true to a degree. And it's kind of funny, because I feel like I played my part in this and enabling some of this, not to a very small degree. I mean, it's not like I've invented this technology and I'm trying to propagate it, but the idea is that it allows, a lot of this automation allows for the I won't say the lazy admin. If you work in a data center, it allows admins to be able to go and manage multiple machines rather than having to have like an unscalable workforce. It basically kind of enables people to get freedom to work on other projects. That's like, like with anything, right? It begins with a good intention, and then not so much gets used for nefarious purposes.
I would say that, and I say this of any tool, that including rhetorical tools, there's nothing inherently wrong in the tool itself, like ever. It's what we do with it as people. That is always the case, which is why you have to have principles. Because if you have principles, then it won't matter what the tool is capable of. So you won't use it for nefarious purposes. The problem is that some people are unprincipled, and they will definitely use tools for nefarious purposes. At which point you have to have some sort of system to stop them from doing so. And again, even that system can be used for nefarious purposes. So we just are constantly fighting this, center of human nature that is willing to do bad things with it's just a tool. That's all it is.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing about it, is that, I mean, if you look at throughout human history, the reason why we're able to develop and become more advanced in our societies is because of labor-saving devices. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't get or understand is the reason why, you had the ability to get women in the workplace was because of these labor-saving devices. I mean, there was labor that they were doing, washing clothes, cooking dishes, et cetera, et cetera. And by coming up with the washing machine, the dryer, the dishwasher, all these things, we were able to go and free women up from these tasks to allow them, I wouldn't say allow, but give them the opportunity to enter into the workforce.
Yes, definitely. Like, a lot of women of means could have gone into the workforce if they wanted to, because they outsourced that labor. But at the same time, do most people of means want to go out into the workforce if they don't have to?
Yeah.
You know, like that takes a kind of a special personality, actually. But yeah, I would never like the whole thing about the washer, the dryer, the dishwasher, the electric oven, the microwave. There's so many things that make our lives easier. And I don't think that they made our lives worse on a like philosophical level. Like a lot of people think that, and I mean, they're like, oh, we got to get back to nature and everything. And it's like, well, there is something to be said for nature as a source of meaning and everything. But I don't think I don't think technology is poison. I don't think modernity is poison to the human mind. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that those things are not the problem. The rat race or the expectations you put on your life in addition to modernity is probably more at fault than the comforts of modernity are.
Yeah. There's a really interesting comment coming from 7th Ray 1. Our society is actually advancing. We obviously, as a society, get to this point. Yeah, I say we have. Or is it just the technology? It's kind of a combination of both. There is a lot of interdependence on the advancement of society and technology. Has our civilization gotten better? I would say we have gotten to a point. And here's the thing that drives me crazy about the modern age with all the civil unrest and things that are going on. We actually do live in probably one of the better times in the history of humanity. We have less wars. We have abundant food for the time being. I always like to say that for the time being because, well, shortages. We've hit this. I don't know if we peaked, but we've definitely become more comfortable. Less war. Advancements in medicine and surgery. And I mean, just like during my lifetime, just like the surgeries that my grandfather had compared to what, I've had, it has been tremendously different. It's become less evasive, stuff like that. So I would say that, we have advances as a civilization. Obviously, the technologies, the tools that kind of allow us to continue to advance, along with, probably some social aspects as well. But at the end of the day, I feel like we've gotten to a point where we can very easily destroy everything we've built, which is unfortunate.
I say there's a good chance of that at any time. Like if you read a lot of history, like even just looking at things leading up to World War II, you can see that, like, or not World War II, really more World War One. A lot of people had it pretty good compared to previous generations, to their parents, to their grandparents, and they felt like during the war years that everything fallen apart, and it was worse than it could ever have been. And the thing is, though, is that we've been getting, if you look at like murder rates throughout history, it's been getting better. It's not like violence is less common than it used to be. And especially
up till last year.
Yeah, up to the last year. You look at but even like a longer history than the U.S. Violence is not a common death compared to how it used to be very common. And that I think that's something to be happy for and to safeguard. We shouldn't let it get worse, obviously, and I'd say that's true of a lot of things, like the idea of our comforts and our rights. We can't let it backslide. And to me, I feel like civil liberties are the one that we should be worried about. And
absolutely.
And the Great Reset is I feel like it endangers our civil liberties to a large extent, because, as I said, they believe they have the right to shape policy, and that has nothing to do with self-governance. And self-governance is essentially the foundation on which civil liberties can exist. Otherwise, you are essentially subjugated. So I feel like that's what we need to be most worried about backsliding. Not even necessarily the supply chain or you know, our comforts and everything. I do think the civil workers are the most at risk right at this moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the whole thing with, you know, talking about the whole thing with the Great Reset is that I feel like the reality is that they're going to push for some sort of totalitarianism or authoritarianism. And obviously, civil liberties don't survive under that. And that was one thing that Glenn Beck was mentioning in his podcast. I thought was pretty interesting. There has been such a push for authoritarianism over the last, I would say, 5 years. Maybe it's probably gone on longer than that, but that's really when I started noticing. Because that was like the big thing that they were talking about when, you know, Trump was rising to power and, you know, getting elected, is that he's going to be an authoritarian, which turned out to really not be the case. I mean, it's funny how they always kind of like blame the other side with the things that they're really trying to do.
It's projection, or Josh Slocum, Suspected Podcast, called it preemptive narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Where you, because a lot of people call it gaslighting, but I kind of agree with that as a name of the tactic, that you accuse your opponent of that which you are doing, or essentially reframe what we would accuse you of doing to apply to some lesser idea that makes no sense. And it's kind of frustrating, because then how do you talk about it? Like, how do you even search for it, you know, when you want to talk about authoritarianism and totalitarianism, or fascism? Even they've diluted that word. It makes it really hard. Like, I'm like, people don't even know what fascism is anymore, that they've said it so much.
No.
That yeah,
I think it's been redefined multiple times to the point where it's like, what is it? It's also been overused. It's like with any word that we've seen that's been overused and misused, it's become meaningless. Much like racism and white supremacy, it's been beaten to death. It's like, it's a great saying. If there's always something, like if everything's racist, nothing's racist. If everything's something, then nothing's something.
It's the same thing. What was that movie, The Incredibles, when he says, like, and then everyone will be special, and then when everyone's special, no one will be.
No one's special.
For special.
This is interesting. So Jado72 says fossil fuel production may soon decline due to depletion. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm not overly concerned about peak oil. That's something that I remember having a discussion with my friend from college back in like this is after college, by the way. Back in the early 2000s, we're talking about peak oil. And they found other ways of getting oil, fracking, you know, shale, stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah, sure. Eventually, at some point, we're going to run out of fossil fuels. You know, that's a very good possibility. But there are ways around that. It's like the whole thing with ethanol, you know, basically using corn to go and, you know, create fuel. That's a possibility. Diesel, biodiesel, stuff like that is also a possibility. The other thing, too, that Peter brings up is that abundant cheap food is also a product of fossil fuels, which is, you know, also correct. And as some of you have already pointed out, which we're all hopefully all aware of, is that there is a fertilizer shortage, which could ultimately lead to a pretty big food shortage in 2022, which is frightening.
That is, I mean, I always am very worried about the food thing because my restricted diet. The thing the thing that really like drives me nuts is the whole don't eat meat, because that makes up the majority of my diet, because I can't eat fruits and vegetables like at all. So I'm like, what are you trying to kill me? Like, it feels like a personal attack, and I do react very emotionally to it, because I'm like, what am I gonna do if you guys say
can you eat the bugs?
I'm not gonna. As I say sometimes, I'm like, I will eat my neighbors before I will eat your bugs.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah, that's funny. I'll eat your ass. That's all he said.
Well, I keep saying this, and because it drives me crazy, because so if you scale up a certain agriculture, you could possibly have an effect on the environment that you don't know you could, because you hit a point that the environment can't sustain. For example, in Russia, they over-farmed plants in one specific area that they depleted the water in a lake that created acidic rain for the area. Now that has nothing to, it had nothing to do with meat. So
yeah.
To me, I'm sort of like, if you scale up bug farming to feed the world, like everyone, you have no idea what the environmental impact from that will be.
Yeah, that's one thing they never talk about, is the environmental impact of actually growing other vegetables and whatnot for vegetarianism and whatnot. That there's still damage that's being caused to the environment.
Yes, definitely. For one thing, they have to kill a lot of animals to prevent the plants from being eaten by the animals. So like ground squirrels and stuff like that. Tons of bugs get killed. They destroy natural habitat when they clear.
Pesticides.
So to me, I'm sort of like, I don't see how this is better for the environment. And then if you're talking about an area that is subject to drought, then you're probably going to kill off natural habitat by taking the water source from it, creating animals will run out of water, and then when the plants start, getting too dry, then the herbivores are not going to be eating anything. And I'm like, I don't see how this is an answer. I always say cyclical farming is the answer, where you rotate out plants and meat. Because you restore your soil. They never talk about soil health ever when they talk about plants. And it drives me crazy. And I'm like, you can't just farm soil over and over and over again.
Well, of course you can. We have fertilizer.
Where are you getting that from, you idiots?
Petroleum.
Oh, God.
731 has a great comment. It says, are you familiar with Nick Land's theory of accelerationism? I am not. I think you'd be very interested. It's okay. It's something related to his comment. Yeah, he also brings up AI, which is something I'm very concerned with. AI and deep learning, quite frankly, scare the piss out of me. Not because it's a bad technology. It's like what we were talking about earlier with any technology. It's basically it's how it's being used, and that's the thing that scares me. Is are you familiar with Prism? What happened back in I guess it was 2013-14 with Snowden?
Oh, somewhat, yes.
So obviously you're familiar with Snowden. He blew the whistle on Prism. Prism was a data collection system that was collecting the metadata on people's phones, phone calls, stuff like that. And that was the main concern people were worried about, is, oh my God, the government's listening to my phone calls, which is obviously a valid concern. It's something you should be concerned about. But the other thing that what people don't understand is that metadata defines you as a person, what your patterns are. They have an idea of what your day looks like based off of this metadata. That's the thing that's so scary about it, is that they know when you go to work, when you leave, and all these other things. They know when you go to sleep based off of this metadata that your phone is transmitting to the carrier. And that enables for them to go and be able to build a pattern on you. And when people start deviating from their pattern, well, maybe something is up, and then the government starts looking into that person. So that's the thing that frightens me. So all this is being done with AI and deep learning. And AI is an incredibly useful tool. And again, AI it's not actually artificial intelligence. It's basically a learning algorithm, is what it is. That's able to go and classify things and look at data and kind of predict things. It's not really a true AI like we all think. But yeah, it's scary because this can be used and weaponized against us. If you've ever seen the movie Minority Report, you know what I'm talking about. Instead of psychics, you're just using artificial intelligence or deep learning, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anytime you try to systematize controlling people and punishing people. Those are two ones that are you need human interaction. Hell, healthcare. Freaking Dune. The entire reason why the universe of Dune doesn't have computers is because they AI'd their healthcare, and it gave a woman an abortion instead of helping her deliver her baby. And so people rose up against AI. That's the Butlerian jihad. So like there's this idea that like AI will make everything easier, and it's like it there are some things that it won't make easier, it'll make them harder. Because if you've ever really worked in trying to do something on a computer, like software wise, like really intensely, you'll notice you're boxing with it. And the deeper that the more stringent the programming would be, like with AI, the harder it will be to get around whatever it thinks is the right answer. And that's going to be a problem. So they found out that if they paired doctors with an AI diagnosis system, they tested them against each other. They were not any better than each other, but together they were better than both of them alone.
Right.
Because the doctor, so the diagnosis AI would send a bunch of possibilities to the doctor, and the doctor would go, "Oh, I never considered that one." Yeah. And it fits better. And so AI can be useful with human interaction, but I don't think it's an input and the final say being in human hands. I don't think
I agree. It could be definitely a useful tool, but the thing I'm afraid of, and this is what we kind of, I covered an article on Monday on my channel talking about the offloading of decision making to AI, and it's like, that's a bad idea. It's great as an assisting tool, being maybe able to narrow things down based off of the model that's been trained or whatever. But when it comes down to making decisions for people, that's what frightens me. Which honestly, all this, again, what we're talking about ultimately does play to the Great Reset, because if you can get all these technologies in place and get people used to it, they can stop thinking for themselves and let the the system make decisions for them.
Yes. I've seen how big tech uses AI to narrow down what you're allowed to talk about. And there's no person you can talk to. There's no Twitter. Person you can talk to solve the problem. And you can see this with a lot of corporations, actually. You can see, and they'll try to pretend you're talking to a person sometimes. That's the really nefarious thing. And but then when you start, the thing is though, is that sometimes I can't tell if it's a human being or not, because having worked in the corporate world, the way that they train people to basically, here's your script, don't go off book. You might as well be AI, and they give you no responsibility to do anything. So they cannot wait until they can replace that person with a bot. And they've been working on it this whole time. They have, and there's no way around them. Like, how many times I've been like, connect me to a person a million times, and they just keep trying to circuit you through different bot algorithms, and it's very frustrating. But they're already doing it to us. They've been doing it to us, especially in customer service, especially in big tech censorship, and when you're going to get demonetized, when you're going to get a strike or whatever, you're never going to get a person. And I think that's horrifying. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah, not having an appeal system is frightening. The fact that maybe the algorithm made a mistake, and it's, fortunately for right now, like if a live stream or a video gets demonetized, you have the ability to submit for a manual review for the time being, which is good. But if like you get a strike on something, it's hard to appeal that, I believe. I don't know. Yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't gotten a strike on my channel. I've gotten a warning.
I've gotten copyright strikes, and those are impossible.
Yeah.
Those are impossible to get around. Because the person they send it to is the company that says they own it.
Oh yeah.
That's not helpful.
I get claims a lot. It's funny because I use Evanto Elements. That's where I get a lot of the music I use for my videos and my introductions and stuff like that. And I always, every Thursday, I play this one song and I always get a claim. Holy crap, it's Carter. Look at that.
I saw you were live streaming and I saw that you had a thing in Discord saying, does anyone want to join? I don't even know what you're talking about. But
we're talking about the Great Reset. You know, just right now we're just kind of in tangent land, but it's fine. It all kind of applies. We're talking about AI and how it's going to fail to improve our lives. So
it will improve it in some ways, but it will also, I think it empowers. The thing I'm worried about with AI is it empowers stupid leaders to make really impactful
decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean to interrupt. Continue on. I'm just.
No, it's cool, man. I think there's one thing. Jado72 is pretty spot on. It says, I don't think most people will be in electric cars. We will be walking and riding bikes like poor countries of the 20th century. Yeah, I mean that's one thing that they're trying to push, right? Is these electric cars. But there was an interesting article that somebody posted on Twitter from earlier in 2020, where basically it says there was a power shortage in California, and it's warning people not to charge with electric cars. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't really think about, is that if we all go to electric cars, that's obviously putting more of a strain on our power grid. And as we all know, the power grid in California is kind of fragile, and at times in Texas, it can be fragile as well. And when you start straining them with everybody having electrical vehicles and not using fossil fuels like we've been doing, that's going to create a major problem. And again, it's much like that mile tax, right? It's the purpose is to limit people's mobility, I think, throughout this country, which is scary as hell.
Did you see that the UK is maybe going to, I think it's actually law that by 2030 you cannot like sell anymore a fossil fuel based vehicle?
No, I didn't hear about that. That's frightening.
Yeah, and it is very frightening. Like, I know that they have their rail system and everything, but the problem is that electric batteries are still not to the point where they can really handle.
No.
Like, especially like they keep talking about like, oh, where are they gonna? Isn't it great? And it's like, I don't know. Can they handle cold weather still? Like, because batteries don't.
I don't think so. Not in like super cold weather. You need something to crank it. I mean, it depends on the battery, right? Because I know that you have cold cranking apps. I'm not an expert on batteries of cars, but I know that in certain areas you have to have a certain type of battery or your car's not going to start.
Well, and then also you're putting there's more pressure on when it comes to energy consumption in a cold area, whether or not the battery works, you have to produce heat.
Mm-hmm.
A combustion engine already produces heat, and then they vent it into the car to warm it. To warm it. So how are you going to heat the cars if the battery doesn't produce the heat?
That's a really good question. I never thought about that. I mean, I don't own an electric car.
I assume they have electric heaters in them and vents and stuff. But I think what they want, the commies of yesteryear, their utopia involved everyone with a hoe, not like I got my hoe. Everyone with a farming implements in the farms.
Like get to work
in the field. Right, exactly. That was the old commie utopia. I think now the utopia they want is they want all of us in cities, and they want the land to be. I would imagine their utopia involves their control of all of the farmland because they want to control what you're eating anyway.
Yep.
So they control all of what's now called flyover states, and they stick everyone in major cities on the coasts and maybe a few other areas, and everything else is under their control. And because it's much easier to have mass surveillance, it's much easier to have control, it's much easier to have social control in a city. Rural communities are toxic to collectivist planners.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was it's pretty funny. One of the things I do on the weekend is I run a tabletop tabletop game with some friends I've known forever. And the current game I'm running is a cyberpunk game. And it's pretty funny because I took a lot of inspiration from what has been going on in 2020. And that was kind of the thing, is that you have these massive sprawling, cities that are on the coast for the most part, and other areas as well. And the rest of the country is basically vacant. And you have, which I kind of borrowed from Gattaca, the concept of valids and invalids. The valids are the people that have their national ID. They've been chipped. They have, their vaccination, all the stuff. And then there's invalids, people who are not in the system. Some of these people, it's been by choice. Some of it has been because of there was a massive data breach, and there was, the national database was hacked into by a group of anarchists and basically wiped out a bunch of data, which caused a large segment of the population to be considered invalid. And a lot of these people either live in like the lower rungs of society, homeless, or they fled to rural areas. But there's parts of the, like I said, it's mainly vacant, but you have these large corporate farms out in the middle of nowhere that are, producing, corn for fuel, and then actual food for people who can afford it. And everybody else is basically eating 3D printed food. So that's kind of my dystopian vision of the future.
Sorry. I thought you were describing Carl. What's his name? Carl Schwab's plan for next year.
Well, I am describing Carl Schwab's plan, but like I said, I incorporated into this, this game that I'm running for my friends, and it was funny because when the whole Ukraine thing, because one of the things I that led to the basically the collapse was World War III starts with Ukraine, Russia invading Ukraine, and then literally after that, everybody starts invading everybody. You have China going after Taiwan. You have India and Pakistan getting into it, and they're the ones that launched the first nuclear exchange. Then you have North Korea invading South Korea, and ultimately it ends up with these platforms being built from space that they start using mass drivers to bombard various countries. And that's what happens to the US, is that there's actually no land war in the United States. It's just China bombarding the United States with mass drivers. And eventually they go and they take the platforms and start bombarding China. And yeah, it's weird. I think it's really interesting. And of course, I don't know if they're going to be getting cybernetics anytime soon, but I know that with Neuralink, that's definitely a possibility. So
the sad thing is, I don't know that cybernetics are necessary to control people.
No, I don't think it's necessary to control people. One of the, obviously the themes of cyberpunk is the cyberware. So yeah, which I kind of feel like we're heading towards, right?
A little bit.
There's the chip, which they said was a conspiracy theory.
Well, I mean, yeah, I always thought it'd be kind of cool to, for us to develop cyberware, because I mean, that could obviously fix a lot of problems with, certain defects. Like, I'm blind in one of my eyes, not permanent, or I wouldn't say not permanent, not fully, but blind enough. And it's like, I would always like to be able to have that fixed at some point. Probably not going to happen in my lifetime. Maybe it could, who knows? But what frightens me about the whole thing with like the neurochip is, well, can it influence your behavior? That's the thing that frightens me about it. And that's ultimately which I think would happen with it, is that that technology would be used to influence people's thinking more so than anything else. So who knows?
Well, and I think a lot of it comes down to the whole social constructivist thing, that people think that, well, wouldn't it be a good thing if we could prevent people from hurting other people? And it's like, oh, that's such an idealist, sweet idea. And it's like, it's still wrong because of the first principle of you don't have the right to tell other people what to do or how to live. And a big part of that is, are you really so moral that you should be the one at the reins of this? And no, because they think they should do it, they never ask themselves that question, if they are moral enough. And by the way, no one is moral enough.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always been a theme in science fiction, right? Is just because we have the capability of doing so doesn't mean we should. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really different than the mentality of any kind of collectivist, right? It's they view humans as cattle, right? And people need to be made to do blah blah blah, and there's never any like overt recognition that means some people are in charge of the other people doing blah blah. Like you recognize that, if you can stop Alex from behaving certain ways because you have a chip implanted in her and you can modify her behavior, but you're promising only to make sure that she's not a serial killer, that's a lot of power that someone else has.
Yes.
And they just gloss over that as if it's a minor detail when actually it's the most important thing about the entire proposal. Is the deadly pernicious abdication of your own free will to someone else.
Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things that we're talking about before you jumped on, was the outsourcing of decision making to AI, which is I think a terrible idea. There was an article I covered on my stream on Monday. It was about offloading your New Year's resolution decision to AI, and then ultimately getting to the point where we're starting to offload decision making to AI, which I think it's obviously a bad idea. And I think it encourages people not to think for themselves, which is obviously, I think, what corporations and governments want, because it makes people easier to control. Yeah, I mean, it's scary.
Well,
I think there's things that AI is great for, but not that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the thing to consider that people will mess with data to get the result that they want anyway. And pretending as if those people don't exist is kind of naive. And especially if you're talking about someone who wants power over a bunch of people, they will be totally willing to mess with the AI to tell them the answer they wanted in the first place.
Well, yeah, AIs are trained. That's the thing that most people don't get. And this has been brought up by the left, which is training AIs with a bias, which is absolutely a thing. You could definitely train an AI to have a bias. You could have it trained to have a bias against conservatives, not just minorities. I mean, it's, ultimately the AI is just as fallible as the person that's training the model.
Yeah, not to, I don't want to give Marcuse credit, but we often talk about his famous essay, Repressive Tolerance, right? I think a lot of people have heard about this concept. And there is some validity to to part of what he's talking about, which is there's a particular framework basically he's talking about the concept of an Overton window in some ways without really naming it that, but there's a framework of discussion that's kind of allowable, and all the discussion that takes place within that framework supports that framework, because that framework is kind of where the discussion is taking place, and he's making, as a leftist, he's making arguments that framework is a rightist thing, which is not true, but whatever. He was making arguments that like, we need to support the crazies over here who are completely going against this framework. We need to elevate their voices. But with AI, I mean, if you've ever even seen, I see this all the time if you ever take any questionnaires about your opinions on things, or even psychological surveys sometimes that are supposed to detect your political positions or that kind of thing. If you step back and look at the questions they're asking and how they're worded, it's trivial to see the elaborate framework and assumptions and presuppositions that underlie all of it. And you think to yourself, obviously that would translate to AI. Like this is all just part of this framework about how we think about things. And you can imagine if AI were developed in the dark ages, part of the framework would be the sun revolves around the earth. Like that would be part of the assumption. And like that wouldn't even be questioned. There wouldn't be a way to figure it out, because it would just be an assumption. And I don't know what the result would be, but it would certainly not be truth, right?
I think it would
certainly
definitely
distort the
skewed in
system.
favor of the Catholic Church, for sure.
It may very well, yes,
well,
and probably not work out for Galileo.
No, here's the
No,
thing.
it
I
did
used to work for a survey company where I would cold call people and ask them questions from a script that they gave me. It was a minimum wage job. I was in college. I lived in a rural area, so there wasn't even that many options for work. This place hired people and went through them like tissue paper, by the way. And some of the questions, some of the surveys we had were political surveys, and one of them, I taught English composition. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at these questions and going, this is like an obvious ploy to convince the callers to vote a certain way. Like, so, and not only will the surveys, have all these presuppositions, but they could, in fact, be trying to influence the person answering the questions in the first place. And so, out of all the people I ended up asking those questions, only one person recognized what was going on and was upset. And I'm like, you have every right to be upset. I'm upset. I don't want to, like, it feels like ash to ask these questions. And it was disgusting. Not every political survey I had was like that, but that one was especially bad.
Yeah.
So I see a very important question coming from Anne, and she says, how can we fight against this? And I have some thoughts. I think everybody does. For one of the biggest things, like if you have kids, be involved with their education, get involved with the school board, pay attention to local elections, make sure that you're putting people into office who are against these ideas. I think that is a very important thing is that, think globally. This is funny because it's such a leftist thing to say. Think globally, act locally. That is very true. That is the, beginnings of what you can do. Just pay attention to where you buy your products from. As much as, I buy way too much from Amazon. I've cut down a lot of my purchasing from Amazon. I still feel like I buy too much from Amazon. Buy local if you can. Buy from other websites that are maybe smaller businesses. But we need to stop funding a lot of these companies that are for this stuff, like Amazon. Microsoft is difficult because everybody uses freaking Windows. Same thing with Apple. I love my Macintosh. I do. But I've gotten to the point where I've had to start thinking about, why do I continue to buy these products that are basically counter to my values and my worldview? One of the things there's two things I did. One of them I don't have on, which is my watch. I got rid of my Apple Watch. That was the first step. That was a very difficult step for me. The second thing is I got rid of my iPhone. I have a Pixel phone, which is ironic because it's Google, but I loaded a custom operating system onto it called Calyx, which is supposed to be about privacy. So I'm slowly having weaning myself off of these big tech companies and these conveniences. It's like, this phone is great, but it's not as convenient as my iPhone, for sure. It's recognizing these things and trying to remove them from your life as much as possible. Stop giving these companies that are for the Great Reset power by giving them money. We got to find alternatives. But the big thing is, like I said, it's think globally, act locally. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Cardinal. How can we push back?
I'm a big fan of the rising DeFi movement, because the decentralized finance. So dealing with the problem is that the U.S. government has tried to strangle every kind of crypto possible, and they've done a good job to kind of destroy the crypto industry. But there are other places in the world where you can found companies and do things, and you can interact with Americans, and like, that's not a problem. Portugal is a great place. There's no crypto tax at all in Portugal, and it's becoming someone just today described it to me as the I guess there's a billboard in Lisbon that says Silly Coin Valley, because all the crypto people are moving to Portugal. But look, this system is built on money, and underneath everything is a financial network that is in bed with the men with guns. It's in bed with the government. Mm-hmm. This is not, a true free market. The most important separation of powers in a free market is the separation of money from government, and we don't have that. And we
Yeah.
haven't had that for a really, really long. 1913 is when the Federal Reserve was created, right? We haven't had that for a really, really long time. And you have very, very large financial institutions in bed with a number of governments. They all have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. You also have some financial institutions that make money loaning money to governments to conduct wars. They view it as an investment, right? Oh, this guy, this strong man looks like he'll be able to invade this country and give a good return on investment, so we'll lend him money. It's not quite that obvious anymore, but they absolutely are all in bed together. And so I don't want to push agorism completely, but getting out of the financial system. I mean, it's inevitable that the U.S. destroyed crypto inside of the U.S. because the U.S. I mean, New York is the center of the finance industry in the Western Hemisphere, basically, and this is ground zero for the orgy between money and government. So they absolutely needed to destroy crypto, and it's no surprise that smaller countries like Portugal, who no one gives a crap about, are like, well, we don't really care if New York falls and the entire financial system crashes. Like, we just want some more people here doing businesses. So sure, crypto's welcome. So I think getting out of the system, it's surprising how much you don't need to spend if you really think about it and work at it. You don't have to be spending as much. You can be saving. You can be moving that into assets that are untraceable, that are outside of the control. I mean, frankly, paying your taxes is probably the worst thing everyone does to support the system. I'm not saying don't do it. You might end up in jail if you don't.
You will end up in jail.
That's the worst thing, right? That's the worst thing that you do, though, right? That's the biggest support that you offer is you pay taxes.
Well, a good friend. This happened to a good friend of mine.
Legal income.
His dad basically did the whole thing. I'm not going to pay my taxes, and I don't know if he actually did any jail time, but he definitely went to court. And I think maybe he spent like a year in jail. I don't remember, but it was.
They'll come after you.
Yeah, they'll come after you for sure.
Yeah, but you can. I think there's alternate economies starting, which is great. We're starting to see a lot of alternate tech companies. I think that will continue. We'll see alternate economies where even if they're above board, at least they're not doing business with the wokies. And I think there's the gray and black markets of the crypto world, and just frankly bartering and all that kind of local stuff that you can do face to face, one-on-one, that no one has to be aware of. If you really want to. If the best way to make a change is anything you can think of that defunds the government.
Oh yeah, which is very difficult to do.
It is.
Another thing too, I think you need a lot of us need to pay attention to ESG scores. For those, I did a video on it, environmental, social, governance scores, which are just driving everything in tech right now. I've worked in tech.
Yeah.
Well over 20 years. And I started seeing a shift with the company I worked at. What the owner would say, say certain things, which I thought was very counter to his personality. That was before I learned about ESG. And now I know where it's coming from. And it's like, the company I work for now, it's completely driven by it. It's insane.
Yeah. I think it's a bubble. I think it's the next bubble.
God, I hope it is.
It's false value. There's no actual value in any of those scores. They're so arbitrary. So to me, I'm sort of like, I wouldn't invest in anything that was doing high ESG or even moderate ESG, because it's all going to tank. I'm absolutely certain of that, because there's just the whole point of investing in a company that you like more for their social things is that your return on investment is probably not going to be as good versus investing in something that doesn't care that much about social stuff. Your return is probably going to be better. So
look at BlackRock though. I mean, these companies make trillions of dollars, managing assets. They have very deep pockets, which allows them to kind of fund this stuff.
The ESG stuff is all a lie though. That's
Yeah.
the problem, is that like BlackRock
It's corporate virtual signaling, and it's
yeah.
funny because I see it with the company I work for. It affects all their decision making when it comes to hiring and all this stuff that what they're doing with their product, so to speak. It's all being driven by this silly ESG stuff. It's not about actual quality or fixing the wrongs of the past. It's nothing more than corporate virtue signaling. And a lot of people ask me, specifically with entertainment, when is this going to end? How can we stop it, etc. Same kind of questions, right? And it's like with really good example of this is Marvel and DC Comics. With the virtue signaling they've been doing with their books, if they were not owned by larger corporations, they'd be out of business, hands down. And the only reason why a lot of these companies are able to get away with pushing ESG is because of the deep pockets of the companies that are funding them.
Yeah, but I want to push back in one sense, not completely. Like I agree they will go away. But it doesn't mean only they will go away, and it doesn't mean that so you can think of ESG as a tax on a tithe to the social justice gods, right? That's what it is. And that means that all the businesses that are doing it are operating suboptimally. They're less efficient than they could be otherwise. It doesn't mean that they're not profitable or that they'll die. It means that they're less efficient than they otherwise would be. And obviously, in a free market with a competitor who was more efficient, that would slowly over time, they would take market share, on average, and those companies would die. But the two things I want to point out is, one, in the US, the ESG scores are so tied to the ESG scores are designed to be viral in the sense that your ESG score goes down if you do business with a company with a poor ESG score, and your ESG score goes up if you do business with a company with a good ESG score. So you can't just maintain your ESG score without an incentive, at least, to encourage strongly people that you do business with to do the same. And that might be dropping business if they're not, if they're hurting your score. And so it's designed to really hit this critical mass where most companies, it becomes this thing that kind of everyone has to do, which means everyone's kind of paying this tax. And that system could last indefinitely, theoretically. If there was no pressure from the outside, it would just be less efficient.
Yep.
Where the pressure is going to come from is, look, guys, I hate to be a broken record on this, and I know they're outright commies and stuff, but Asia doesn't give a crap about any of this. India doesn't care either. Many places in the world think that we are absolutely buffoons for doing all of this. It is
okay, Carter. I got to push back on that because,
well,
at the end of the day, what they want to do with ESG is roll it out to people, and they want it to be social credit. This is the way of them backdooring social credit in the United States, because this is something that they've rolled out to China. And
China has social credit already. Yes.
Yeah. Well, they've been working on it for a number of years. Obviously, I've talked about the Chinese social credit since I found out about it back in 2017.
Yeah.
I mean, and this, for me, ESG it's not just about the wokeness. It's ultimately about controlling people through it.
I agree. So
not just companies.
No, but I agree. But my point now is, you have Asia doesn't care about the ESG score. They do care about something else. So they have their own tithe, right?
Yes.
And their own thing they have to do. And the question will come down to, whose is more efficient, right?
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, all things being equal, it's like, okay, whose is more efficient? And the other thing you have to remember is that, you mentioned deep pockets. I'm saying this as someone who lives in Silicon Valley and has lived here for 20 years and been involved in startups. Silicon Valley's been dead in terms of its entrepreneurial soul for a while now. I really believe, let's take politics, philosophy, everything else away. If I was going to start a company, it would not be in Silicon Valley. It would have been in Shenzhen even years ago, right? It wouldn't be here. If I didn't care about governments or whatever, and I was just like, it's not what it was.
I'd agree with you. Yeah.
But it's one thing to say deep pockets and another thing to realize just how deep those pockets are. This can go on. They can bleed cash and suck for a
That's my point.
really, really long time. We will be well dead before they run out of cash. Like this can be a really, really torturous, slow death because they've got a lot of cash. So they might be living on borrowed time, but it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
I've always said that they don't care about the money. That the money is not the goal anymore. The goal is the control
money is the vehicle.
of people. What?
The money is the vehicle.
Yes, it's the vehicle, but they want to control. That's what their actual goal is. So they will be willing to sacrifice some money to do that.
Clearly, yeah. Because some of these people are just doing it pragmatically, right? Maybe you're bossy, and I don't know. But maybe your company's like, well, we got this friggin' ESG score. I guess we got to go mouth some things that, whatever. We got to go do some stuff because otherwise we'll lose this client and we won't be able to do this or our bank or whatever. Okay. Those are, people without principles, and I'm not saying they're good, but there are also just straight up believers who are running some of these companies who are like, yes, ESG is excellent. I love it. I'm happy to pay this tithe to my God. It's a religion.
Yeah. Secular religion. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
I think we love as we've been calling that out for a while, which is it's funny, right? It's funny how the people in the secular religion don't realize it's a secular religion. But the other thing too, which which kind of goes hand in hand with ESG scores, is employee resource groups. Which have you run into that?
I don't know anything about those. Tell me about those.
They're basically special interest groups within a company that revolve around arbitrary traits. Typically, what we saw with the stuff going on with Netflix and Dave Chappelle was the trans, I guess the Alphabet employee resource group. So you basically it's groups within the company that are special interest to a degree. The company I work for has them too.
Are they funded at all by the company? Is it like the HR department is like, here's some cash and some organization?
I don't know if they're funded as much as they basically. I don't know much about them. I'm just aware of them, but basically, like I said, they kind of act as special interests. I don't know if they're funded.
I guess funded's the wrong word. Are they like? Is it like employees voluntarily and without HR get together and say, hey, we're Alphabet, let's have a little group and meet on Thursdays? Or is it like HR says, we need an Alphabet group and you can have XYZ conference room and why don't you set an agenda and tell us what to do about ABC, blah, 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 right?
Being that I'm not involved with them, I can't tell you per se what exactly they do, but they are basically, I would say, sponsored at the very least by HR. As to what, official capacity. I don't know. It's one of the things I've been meaning to look into. Oh, they are.
I mean, HR is the disease vector into every. This is where all the bad, not all of them, but a lot of the really horrible ideas. Most of the social justice warriors, they come in through HR, right?
Oh my God. Tell me about it. The diversity and inclusion training I had to go through, it was pretty funny. I was I saw that Xeon Reborn. I'm curious what do you mean by swatted? Swatted as in he was swatted like a fly, as in YouTube kicked him out, or the police showed up at his place?
Yeah, swatted by the cops.
Oh God, yeah, I see that now. Swatted by the cops. Holy shit.
How do you swat a live stream? Don't the cops know? Like, we can see what's going on. There's cameras.
Okay. If the cops are watching Tim full, I seriously, I doubt it. It's more like there's an incident going on at this place, and sending the SWAT team. I don't know. That's interesting.
Well, they say
I view swatting as the initiation of force and attempted murder. Yes. I view swatting as attempted murder. If you do that, you should go to jail for attempted murder.
Oh, I agree.
Well,
and I've heard a lot the owner of Alterna Comics was swatted. That's right.
I've heard a lot of live streamers talk about it before, and what they say is like at a certain point you need to contact your local police and tell them that you are a live streamer and that this could happen, that nothing is going on at your home, except for a live stream. And like some people have said it's worked out in their favor because then cops have called them and said, hey, we got a tip and I know we have contact with you previously, but that kind of depends on the culture of your police force locally.
I probably shouldn't tell the police what I'm doing. They might be like, oh, we need to swat that guy.
Yeah. Frightening stuff. Okay, so Super Iron Bob, and a big tech company I know. It is endorsed by management. Yeah, it typically is. And anyone who comes up with one is given resources and mentions in all hands. Yeah.
Unless it's the straight white male club, and in which case.
Yeah, you're not going to get it. Yeah. 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 Good times.
Yeah.
Good times.
So wait, I have a question. You posted in Discord. I don't know if you talked about this. You posted a letter in Discord. Did you guys talk about that yet?
We talked at the very beginning, and we quickly got diverted into other topics, but we can bring it back up. Yeah. Which is funny because, so this was a letter that was sent to the Dutch finance minister about the Great Reset. And, we kind of covered some of the text that was on there. Yeah. Thanks, Bev.
Yeah, I did read the letter, so you don't have to like, do you talk about this? This is when I looked at this, I was like, wow, it's not a conspiracy. Like, it's not like a behind the doors. It's just like a public meeting conspiracy. It's like, hey, how do we use COVID to do the Great Reset?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about it is, like, when this got released, Bev, if you want to pull up the other thing I sent you, this came up the exact same day where you had Reuters putting out this article talking about the Great Reset. Yeah, this is it. This was trending on Twitter the exact same day, maybe even afterwards, that basically calling the Great Reset, it's not what you think it is. It's not some sort of conspiracy about globalism. It's just this annual meeting that happens every year in Davos with the World Economic Forum. Shh, it's okay. Quiet down. It's fine. Don't
listen to all the shadowy leaders of the world that get together and decide what to do with your money in life.
Well, it's they're not. It's not a global conspiracy that where they're planning to control everything, but it's a meeting where they're planning to control everything.
Yeah, well, it's like the redefinition of words. It's like how Fauci redefined gain of function, right? I mean, it's the same thing,
right?
Yeah,
That's what I said. Marx was dumb. Marx should have been like, no, I'm not trying to destroy capitalism. I'm just trying to help the economic recovery with my new proposal.
Spot
like
on.
I said, it's the corporate phrase, because I've heard it from corporations more than anyone else, where it's like, we're not doing X, we're just doing the very definition of X.
Yes.
Right.
Well, the funny thing about it is, like, every time I see a hit piece, and typically it's when it starts trending on Twitter, something gets exposed, you start seeing I want to say the Access Media. It's something with entertainment. Legacy Media.
Axios, that one, or?
Well, Axios. No, Access Media means people basically will do stuff for access. Access to movies, but yeah. It kind of goes hand in hand. Legacy Media, mainstream media, whatever. They always write these articles when something comes out saying, oh, it's just, a bunch of conservatives and they're being silly. It's this meeting. And it's like, no, man, it's like there's a freaking book on it. I mean, Klaus Schwab wrote a book telling you exactly what he's going to do. And they're trying to say that, COVID was invented to facilitate. No. People are taking advantage of the situation, just like with anything. They're taking advantage of they're not letting a good crisis go to waste, ultimately. Right. So it's just, I think it's hilarious. But all the information is right there in plain sight.
Yeah.
But yet they still write these articles. No. It's not what you think it is. No, it's exactly what you think it is.
Those articles aren't written for, obviously they're not written for us.
No, they're not.
I think
it's for the normies.
They're written for, and I think they're written for, specifically, I think they're written for anyone who hears something about this, has a little bit of anxiety, but is too lazy to do real research.
Exactly.
And that person is just searching for please give me something to feel better.
Yes.
And sort of like, oh, here's a headline that will make you feel better about it.
Yeah.
They're wrong. It's not that. It's the definition of that. Okay.
A really good parallel for this is it's the peaceful but fiery protest.
Yes.
Well,
exactly.
To me, it's they're telling the exact same information as the conspiracy theorists. The information isn't changing. What they're saying is going on. It's just the tone by which they do it. Like, the person who's telling you the truth is like, this is scary, this is frightening, pay attention to this. And they're like, oh, no, it's not scary. It's totally fine. But the information is the same. So it's really a definition of tone, and like, oh, this person's comforting me, so I'm gonna go with that one as over the person who's telling me I should be scared.
Yeah. What else do you think that we can do to push back against the Great Reset and the stuff that's been going on?
Maybe Alex has some. Alex didn't.
Yeah, that's right. Alex, you didn't get a chance to talk.
I did not answer that. And I do. While I agree with both of you on what you had to say about what we can do, I do think we need to recapture some major cultural influences.
Oh yeah.
By which I mean entertainment. People will always want to be entertained in some way, and I think we need to get that out of agitprop, because right now that's what it's mostly being used for, or a soothing balm for the public. And I think it would be a good idea if we took back some of that territory, because, for example, like I've talked about this before, the fact that the literary novel is completely captured. So we need to like promote artists who are not captured artists. Same thing with movies and music and all that stuff. I think we really need to push that as much as we can, and maybe not give traditional Hollywood or traditional record labels as much of our money as we have been. Same thing with publishing houses. They're all in New York anyway.
Well, that's one thing I like that Ben Shapiro is doing. He's doing the whole thing with making entertainment. And that's one thing I know Temple has always talked about is we have to create culture. And I completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with that as well. And even though I went on the agorists route before, I do want to say I think the most important thing of all this is what you said at the beginning, Ian, which was like, it's really about our kids. Look, we're done, guys. I mean, it's hard. We're all old enough. I'm not even calling you guys old. I'm just saying we're all old enough that people our age are unlikely to change their opinions in a major way. They're unlikely to change their fundamental psychology. They're very unlikely to make major life decisions, and it just doesn't happen.
It's the reason why the woke want to get a hold of your kids.
Yeah, and they have been the left has been much smarter than anyone else about the importance of owning the academic institutions and owning your children. And every communist country, every plan for communism or socialism always contemplates early childhood education, if not outright state parenting. Because the collectivist ideologies are based on this idea that this false idea that humans are a complete blank slate that can be programmed by the right ideology to behave in the way that will make Marx proud, right? So, and that's obviously false. That doesn't work. That's not how humans are. But that's what they believe. And so but there is some truth to the fact that if you get a kid early, you can absolutely make a huge impact. And they have controlled. I mean, it was smart how they did it, right? They came in through esoteric subjects like PhDs in philosophy started saying absolutely ridiculous things. And it slowly moved through the humanities departments, and art started to really, really suck. And everyone was like, gee, that's weird. Why are we throwing paint at a canvas and saying that's art? I don't know. Yep. That's the thing now. And that it just kind of slowly it seeped out into the rest of the humanities. It seeped out into economics. It seeped out into like history. English departments are basically just postmodernist indoctrination departments at this point. That's all they are. They don't actually teach any English.
That's crazy.
Like that's how it is. And then of course it starts to go even outside of humanities and starts to bleed into the hard sciences, as unbelievable as that might be. And it starts to get pushed down into high schools, junior high schools, elementary schools. Now we have that, what is it? The gingerbread trans thing for like preschoolers about, hey, 3-year-old, what gender are you? Third infinite number.
Mm-hmm.
So
hey, Bev, share this because this plays into what we've talked about in a lot of ways. It's funny because I covered this in my last video.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. This is from whitehouse.gov with Build Back Better. And it talks about the whole thing. And it really gets into what you're talking about with them getting them early, right? Because it starts off with Linda, who's a mom. And, she works for a factory and only makes $40,000 a year.
But we haven't mentioned a dad. I guess
there's a reason. No, we haven't. We haven't mentioned a dad. Yeah,
let's find out why.
Yeah. So
there's no father.
There's no father in the picture. The father is never mentioned. But the kid is born, and so she starts getting this tax credit, which is the $300 per month, so she could buy groceries. The tax credit is nothing new. I've always had a problem with it. It was pretty funny at the time they first started talking about the tax credit. One of my roommates, actually, I would say one. I had some roommates that were a married couple and they had a kid, and they didn't make a lot of money, and they were getting the tax credit. I was like, I'm so against that. He's like, why? It's like, I'm on it. I was like, it's kind of obvious, man. It's like he just didn't earn it. It's like,
hey, we're incentivizing people who can't afford to have kids. Yay.
Yeah, exactly. So he goes into pre-K, and this is yet another thing that they've been pushing. And this is something that I know was pushed years ago in where I live, pre-K. And of course, they want to do this, pre-K everywhere. And
I'm going to defend tax credit. I do support tax credits for children if it is in the following form. You get all of your taxes back if you were ever a child. That I'm totally down with.
I'm sorry. This is where they get into the whole pre-K thing, which is the free program, which goes back to the whole indoctrination thing that you're talking about. Getting the kids early.
He turns like cigarettes.
3.
You got to get him the high quality pre-K. By the way, the fact that they say can you imagine? Always think of the government programs as the DMV. That's your model. Can you imagine the DMV be like, when he turns 3, he does a high quality. He goes to the DMV for pre-K. Whoa. I'm not sure I'd use the phrase high quality for that, but thanks.
There's 2 things you can think of. Go ahead.
I keep saying that every time someone says, oh, I want the government to control my healthcare. And I'm like, wait, have you been to the DMV? I don't even drive. I've been there. That place is a nightmare.
Not just the DMV. I mean, look at the medical system for vets.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
I live in Phoenix. The big article was about the one here and how horrible it was. It was awful.
Well, under Bush, there was this huge scandal with the I'm totally blanking what the acronym is for
Head Start or the Veterans Hospital thing.
The Veterans Hospital stuff.
Oh, I don't remember, but I remember what scandal you're talking about. Yeah.
Shit, I'm completely forgetting what the system's called. Anyway, but yeah, there's a huge scandal, and it's like we're talking about like there's like mold in these hospitals that the veterans would go to. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. And it's like you're right. It's like, yeah, think of the DMV and think of the medical care that our veterans get.
Right. And now think, by the way, what if the DMV's purpose
was the VA? Thank you. Your car. It's the VA.
Oh, VA, yeah. All right, so so we indoctrinate the kids at 3. Then what happens?
No, they
now
go to school.
High school. Okay.
They go to college, a community college, where they I love this, where they get Pell Grants. Because if you know anything about Pell Grants, you have no money. You typically are poor if you get a Pell Grant. And so the funny thing about it is he learns to become a solar wind technician. But
he doesn't learn the most important thing, which is that wind is not constant and doesn't blow all the time. They skip that over in his entire education.
Yeah.
Oh, and the fact that the wind turbines are not recyclable.
Yeah, and their average lifespan is what, 10 or 20 years or something, and they
kill birds.
require a massive amount of toxic processing and mining of pretty horrible.
And the cycle continues. Essentially, we see Linda and her son, who basically has a kid of his own, and the cycle repeats, cradle to grave.
I always found this
showing us what the inside of the prison looks like.
I found this disturbing because of the idea that, like, it suggested this idea that this regime would be longer than 4 years. And I was like, you can't. I'm like, you're implying that you're always going to be in power to have this continue for the entire life of span of a human being. And that is a terrifying prospect that you are saying that.
Well, at the end of the day, what they're selling is a fantasy, right? I mean, they're selling you the best case scenario, which we all know is highly unlikely. You know, it sounds great. It sounds wonderful. That's what a better world.
Guaranteed. I will bet my house that this would never happen this way. He can pass the plan exactly as he wants. This is not how it will go. It's not highly unlikely, Ian. It's impossible.
Yeah. All we have to do is redistribute the world's wealth.
Right. Yeah. All we have to do is take it from the people who work and know how to earn it and give it to the people who don't. Yeah. The kid stuff, man, the best thing you can do, raise a kid who thinks independently and is self-sufficient. Like, teach them to be entrepreneurs, teach them to think independently. Do not indoctrinate them. Like, don't counter indoctrinate them. If they're going to go off and have their moments where they dye their hair pink and cut it short and get a nose ring and scream about, I don't know who do they scream about? Rupert Murdoch? Who knows? Right. And they cry about George Bush. No idea
what kids rebel against these days. They basically have everything.
They're allowed to go.
They rebel against their gender is what they do.
Sure. Well, I mean, you don't let them get surgery, but let them let them go through their stages. But if you teach them how to think early on, I think you'll be surprised at how easily they reject bad ideas. My daughter, who's listening to me right now, so it's kind of weird to talk about her, but she's sitting in front of me doing homework. I'm probably not going to agree with every decision that she makes, but she'll hear stuff, and I don't have to have talked about it. She's already like, oh, that's stupid for reason A, B, and C, and they're not mentioning X, Y, and Z, and like this is illogical. And it's like, kids need to learn that authority. And this is the problem that I have with a lot of conservatives who believe that what they need to teach their kids is respect for their authority. And you need to actually eradicate respect for authority, and you need to teach kids that their own thinking mind is the authority. It needs to be questioned. And the authority is reality. It's reason and facts. And like that, that's the authority. And their job is to be a slave to reason and facts and evidence. That's their job. That's how they survive, right? If facts contradict their belief, they need to change their belief. And if facts contradict what someone's telling them, that person's wrong, no matter who it is.
Don't you know the facts are wrong, right? I mean...
Right. Yeah. So remember the Clinton the Clinton. I was just telling my daughter this the other day when the Clintons were in charge. Bill Clinton was president. Do you remember where they used the phrase? Maybe you guys are too young. They introduced the phrase.
I was in my 20s during that time period. So
okay. Yeah, me too. That statement is no longer operative. Remember they used this phrase? So they would like say something and then it would like later be a lie. And instead of like saying like, oh, that was a lie, or we changed it, like, oh, that statement's no longer operative, and they would just move on to a different statement.
It's the modern day parlance is alternative facts.
Yeah. The science is the
science.
And I'd say that like if you can teach your kids to think for themselves, to like really consider things and everything, whether or not you're able to be very involved in their actual education, I think they could still stand up to it. My parents were not able to be very involved. They didn't go to school board meetings. I was lucky if they were able to go to a PTA meeting because they worked nights. But
right.
I I was taught to think for myself, to stand up for myself. So I did not get crushed into submission by my public schooling. And so it's like, even if you can't get them out of public school, I think it is possible to get your kids through it without them losing themselves to this chic mentality. But I mean, that involves a kind of parenting that I don't think a large portion of the population is willing to do. And I think that's sad, because I think every parent should do that. I think every parent should instill in their child like individuality, strength of character, and reason and logic. I think those are the most important things a parent can do for their child. And it's just something that I think needs to be valued more when it comes to parenting, more than the hugs and the I was there for you when you were crying, when you scraped your knee. I really think those other things are more important.
Yeah, they are.
Strength.
But
yeah,
I think that getting involved with the PTA and kids education. I mean, if you can't pull them out of school, teach them yourself. Yeah, that's good. Join like the pods they do for teaching or whatnot, because you want to make sure that they're not being indoctrinated, because that's what schools, unfortunately. You can always, I guess you can make the argument, schools have always been about indoctrination. It's just a different form of indoctrination that we're seeing now.
Yeah, and all right, I guess I'm going to go here. So I was not going to go here, but I'm going to go here.
Go there.
Look, until very recently, and I'm not saying this out of misogyny, but until very recently, kids typically had two parents living in the same house together. Typically. And one parent was working and one parent was staying home with them. Now, usually that was the woman. I don't really care who it is. Obviously, when they're getting breastfed, it's hard for that not to be the woman. But it doesn't matter so much who it is. It typically was the woman. Maybe for legacy reasons, maybe for, women prefer to do that biological reasons that would, make people pissed off if you started saying on average they're more likely to choose that, right? But regardless,
you want to hear something funny, Carter? When given options, if women have the option of going to work or staying home and being a mother.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
they didn't stay home.
Of course, right. Yeah. So along came, I think by this point, feminism was already going off the rails in some respects. They had already lost the narrative, because what they started to do was vilify women who chose to stay home and tell women that what they did, ironically, is the feminists used the male idea, the male conception of power hierarchy and what matters, the male value system, and they took it and imposed it on women and said, you only matter if you matter according to the male value system, which is all about money and success in a career.
Yep.
They didn't, and if you at all have an alternate value system that involves, I don't know, raising your kids, managing the family, like creating an environment for the family that is wonderful, that you enjoy and enjoying your life. That's a horrible value system. You are a slave. You just don't know it. You're an idiot. You're not being self-actualized. Stop it. Right. And so they came in with this attitude. And of course, the government loves the idea of putting everyone in the workplace. When you showed that Biden cartoon, right, it's like, what they mean is, like, I'm a templatized version of that would be taxpayer name makes blah 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 and has a kid. Like, it's a taxpayer. They want more tax. It doubles the taxpayers. And in fact, it can more than double the taxpayers, because if you're both working, often now you have to hire someone to watch your kids. So now all that is income. If only one person works and the other person stays home, guess who's not paying taxes? The person staying home, the child care facility, all this other crap and support services that you need because you're out both working. So the government.
I want to bring up something really, really quickly that you briefly touched on, the whole thing with the what we've seen with the left and the push for women not having kids and choosing careers. One of the things that was really interesting about this is that you kind of saw that with Sex and the City. That was a big push in Sex and the City. The irony behind all this is that Candace Bushnell, the woman who created Sex and the City, who is in her 60s, this actually came out like a couple of years ago. Yeah, 2019. She regrets choosing her career over having children. This is a woman that was pushing it.
Yep.
And, you know, it's just kind of ironic that, but this is,
it's another inconvenient fact, though. A lot of women that made that decision do regret it later in life. Yeah, not all of them.
Here's the thing that I want to say about when it comes to women, and this is just from how I understand women, is that they want someone to tell them what will make them happy. And to some extent, they don't want to actually examine what will make them happy. And it kind of pisses me off because I'm sort of like, you fought to be empowered, and then you didn't, instead of taking that empowerment from getting the vote, from, you know, opening up options for yourself as a group, you just let someone else tell you what to do again. And that is
accurate. Yeah.
And my problem with that is that it's like, not everyone's life has to match in lockstep. I mean, I always felt that way. Like, I know I'm not an average woman. I know that I'm not like most women who want to have babies. Like, the fact that most women want to have babies, that's not like some deep, dark secret or something like alien or weird. No, that's freaking normal. Most people want to have kids. The fact that I don't doesn't discount that, nor does the fact that most people want to have kids discount the fact that I don't. And it's like, I'm not so insecure that I get upset about the fact that other people want to have kids. Why would that upset me? And the same thing in the reverse.
And that's one thing too that has happened. Is like it used to be when a woman didn't want to have kids, it was looked down upon, and it got to the point it was normalized, and that's fine. I think it's, you know, obviously people having a bodily autonomy and being able to make their own decisions is very important, whether you're male or female. But we, as you pointed out, we started seeing women being demonized for picking to be a stay-at-home mother rather than having a career.
That never.
And it's like, but I thought it was about choices. I thought it was about women being able to make their own decisions, and not about pressuring
feminists.
A certain lifestyle.
So that's the thing. The feminists didn't actually respect women enough. What they said was, "You're too stupid to make you're making the wrong choices, you stupid brainwashed housewife idiot. Yeah, you have to do what the feminist leftist professor says you should want to do, which is go be a lawyer. That's how you actualize. And getting back to this." I just want to get back to this government thing for a second. You get the government loves that you're all, now you got two taxpayers. They can't support the kid. So now they've got to pay someone else. So now you got all this tax revenue, and it creates pressure because the government can start taxing more and more and more. They can create a lot of economic pressure. Now you've normalized both of you working. Now they feel like, well, now we can't afford good school or the childcare or whatever. So now the government appears like a savior to step in and say, oh, we'll take care of those things for you. Right. And what they did was they normalized two-parent incomes. They normalized two parents working. They made you feel like that's the norm, that to get by, you need two people working. And maybe they also made that a reality by wrecking the economy. But like they made that. So that's the thing that you got used to. And now you're turning to them for help when you have some other situation where we can't afford this extra thing. And of course, they've normalized single motherhood. They've said,
as we saw in the Biden things.
Yeah. Right. And they love single mothers because single mothers are in an impossible situation. They need to spend time and money and energy on their children, but there's only 24 hours in a day. They got to sleep, some of them, and they also have to earn money. Like, it's almost impossible to do that well unless you are a white collar worker and can make a whole bunch of money and pay someone else to watch your kid. So I mean, it's a really, man, it's insidious and it's pernicious. And here we are telling people, hey, the solution to this problem is more government take over your kids for you. That's the solution, right? When actually it's like, hey, you could go back. We could go back to a time when you were taxed much less, when one person was enough to, provide an income.
You really think we can go back
for your family? Well, I mean, theoretically we could. No one's going to do that, obviously. But yeah, I mean, could we go back? Yes. If anyone on the stream was, king of the universe for a year, sure. Like you could unravel stuff and go back. It would be shocking to the system. And I think a lot of people would be like, I got to go get work. I can't get my welfare check.
I think a lot of people would not give it up because of modern convenience.
They don't want to, and I think a lot of people have now they view kids as an accessory, not a responsibility. Yeah. Which is disgusting. But the government loves that as well. The government wants you pumping out kids that you view as an accessory that you don't have time and money for, because they would love to handle them, because they'll just indoctrinate them and they get more voters later on, and those voters will be more NPC than you are, because they'll be deeper indoctrinated, less likely to fight against them, and more willing to be compliant. So
I think that's what they're trying for sure.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, they're not even happy if you only have one kid. The whole one and done thing that's unacceptable, because that's not even replacement level. And that just drives them crazy.
Well, I don't think they care about replacement level anymore.
No, they don't. They want to drive the population down.
Yeah. It also, when you're below replacement level, you need to bring in immigrants
outside. Yeah.
And one thing that the government really likes about immigrants from basically anywhere. I mean, I'm sure there's exceptions. I'm not saying everyone, right? Obviously. But in general, there's an American, I'm going to use the word spirit, but you guys know I'm an atheist. So like, I mean that in the metaphorical sense. There's an American spirit, which is part of the American culture, which is a little bit more independent and self-governing than elsewhere. Not completely, but, and then certainly it's died over the years, but still more than, go travel somewhere else. There's still more, Americans still have this more of an attitude of like, I got a right and I got independence and I can, like, there's still more of that attitude in Americans. And that attitude is harder to indoctrinate. It's harder to control. It's harder to, like, we're a pain in the ass to the establishment. Americans, I mean, the establishment is kind of anti-American in the sense of what America actually stands for.
Yeah, it
not
really
just kind
is,
of, like, completely, right? So it's like, it's being run by people who hate the philosophical foundations of America. They hate the spirit of America explicitly. And so it's better to have people who have less of that spirit come in, because you can, especially if they're dependent, they can rely on your government services at the very beginning and help you acclimate and help your kids and blah, blah, blah. Like, now they're good. They're good. They're good servants. They're good citizens moving forward. And they're much preferable to some dude who thinks he's like, I'm the next Paul Revere. I'm warning everyone, and I'm going to, let's go start a revolution. Like, that's not fun to govern. They don't want that.
No, they don't. They don't want free-thinking individuals out there. That's the reason.
Not at all.
Why, we see all the censorship on Twitter. It's the reason why we see the censorship on YouTube. There's still that, as Unsafe Space is very aware when it comes to mentioning certain topics on YouTube and it being against a certain narrative and getting strikes. So, yeah. Not a doctor, by the way.
Oh, microns. Yeah. You can't. But listen to every politician. I mean, even I know a lot of people love Trump, but Trump did this too. He's more of a populist. But listen to any time Obama or any of the prior presidents talk about what makes America special, because they all have some moment in their presidency where they're expected to make some rallying speech about why America is awesome, right? Like even the ones that kind of are clearly kind of hate America deep down, they need to like put on a show for the mainstream about why, Americans are special because of blah, blah, blah. all of the reasons they list are wrong. They've always been wrong. My entire life, the list of reasons are completely wrong, right? No one ever gets up and says, you know what makes America special? We never trust our government. We are like, it was our Constitution was designed to limit the power of these assholes in Washington. And it's a self-reliant country where individualism reigns, and you have a right a priori to it predates the government, and the government shouldn't be allowed to do anything. Like, that's what makes him like, no one says that.
No, they don't.
No one.
Well, no, not especially when you're talking about the president, because the president is part of the federal system about expanding federal power. So they don't want that. Right. They're the antithesis to that idea, in fact, because they've been expanding federal power every single time. So yeah. They'll never say it.
So this is funny. So Peter says, Carter 2024. I think your campaign slogan should be "Tear it all down."
Yeah. Vote for me, and I'll free black pills for everyone. I don't know. I just this is the thing. And someone like me would never want the job, right? I actually think it would be easier. I mean this in all sincerity. I'm not trying to be funny. It would be easier to secede and start over than it would be to fix the cesspool in Washington. It's hands down easier to secede. Not that it's easy.
One of my concerns about secession, and I get this, I talk about this on occasion too, and some people always push back on it, is the whole China situation. I think if that we as the United States would break apart, that China will use that as an opportunity to strike.
I don't either.
How so?
I mean, I see that risk. China's got, I mean, look,
and I know China's got
lot of its own problems.
It does.
It mimight use that opportunity to invade Taiwan, because we're busy and distracted. But you're not going to like this answer, but China's too smart to do that. It costs too much. It burns too many resources. They don't need to do that. They already own a bunch of our debt.
By strike, I'm not talking about militarily. Necessarily.
Sure. I hope that they do if there's a secession, because if there's a secession, I'm on the side that no longer holds US dollars. And I hope China dumps their dollars. Good for China. Like, I mean, not that I, support the commies, but like, look, we don't, sure, maybe they will use that opportunity. I don't care. Like, to me, the prize of an actual free state, like a place that really is anywhere near legally what America used to be, is so beautiful and so powerful and so productive, and it's such a brilliant star of light that if that happens, you know what? They can invade Taiwan. People can, do all the things that governments are going to do and destroy each other in the ways that governments are going to destroy each other. Mm-hmm. That new country will very soon be an economic and world superpower if it wants to, because the productivity that gets unleashed when you let people be free is unthinkable. It's what happened. I mean, America was a crappy, shitty little set of colonies with some poor, stupid farmers. They didn't have universities really to speak of.
Beat the greatest empire in the world.
It was shit. United States was shit. All they did was say, "Hey, the governments are going to leave you alone. Let's see how that goes." Boom! It did not take long to suddenly get to the point where it's a world superpower. That didn't take long.
No, it didn't.
Well, and that's the thing. I agree with Carter on this, that I don't think they would militarily invade. And I don't see a distinction currently with China, with like, what is China going to do more of? They're already buying land. They're already.
It was just funny because that's what
they
it was
already own all the social media and tech companies.
Like
and everything. So they already are in bed with all of our corporations. So I'm sort of like, what more could go wrong at that point if you don't think it's military?
You could be very surprised that there's more that could go wrong. But
then at the same time,
it's a risk I'm pointing out. I agree with Carter. I think that's probably the only thing that would probably fix the situation is for people to go, fuck it, we're out of here.
Yeah, I think so too.
If Trump was to win again, that's a good possibility. You could see that in blue states saying, fuck it, we're out of here.
What, Calix?
Sure. And actually, that's worse. I would rather be the secession. I would rather be on the side exiting than like the wokies seceding leaves us with this like disgusting Jabba the Hutt federal government we got to dismantle. Like,
no,
what the hell? Like, who wants that? I don't want that. They can take it. They're the ones who love it. They're just going to want to rebuild it when in their newly seceded country. So why don't they just take it? I don't want it.
Well, and then also at the same time, when it comes to what's going on, like comparing like the federal government versus the CCP and what they do, all I could think is like, I don't see a distinction between the CCP crushing me and the federal government crushing me. When it comes to my civil liberties,
I
don't
do.
make a
I
distinction.
see
one's worse
there.
I do too.
You know what my distinction is, though? It won't be the same as Ian's. China is thousands of miles away and doesn't give a shit about me.
True.
They're way less of a threat than Washington. Like, if you're worried about being crushed by a totalitarian government, stop worrying about China. Like, they're busy figuring out their own crap. And to be frank, they're not communists. They are authoritarian, right? But they're not communists. They are opportunistic authoritarians. They have figured out how to run a tax farm in an authoritarian manner. They can call it whatever they want, but it's not communism. And they do whatever is pragmatically the most efficient thing to keep them in power and keep their economy going. And like, okay,
one of the things
horrible, but you know, I'm way over here.
Yeah. I mean, that is a very valid point. And if we're talking about, a hypothetical situation, I would say China's worse. But yeah, you're right. You know, the United States government is here. And one of the things I thought was interesting with that Glenn Beck podcast that we were tagged in, they were mentioning the whole idea of, we need authoritarianism to fight climate change. And that's an actual threat to us. The United States adopting authoritarian measures to implement their, actions to fight climate change and basically forcing it at the point of a gun.
Yeah. In fact, here's how you should be afraid of the Chinese government as a muse to the authoritarians here. That's the threat from China.
Bingo. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a lot of people that look at, hey, this is wonderful. How do we get United States?
Right. Ooh, social credit scores. What a great idea.
Fantastic. How do we
controls? How do we stop people from ever pulling money out of the US ever? Like, all this stuff is nothing that China
digital
is doing
currency.
is anything that Democrats, like leftists, wouldn't love.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
No, they yeah.
All that control makes them wet.
It does.
I'm glad you said it, not us, because we'd be canceled for it. Anyway.
What's this Glenn Beck thing? I didn't hear what he called out. What?
Oh, it was in his podcast. I'll send it over to you. But it was tagged to Unsafe Space, or I think it was tagged to Bev actually, and she tagged me in. And the podcast itself was really interesting. And it was like an hour and 35 minutes, and with his guest, and he was talking about a lot of different things. One thing which we didn't touch on was the whole thing with the cyber warfare thing that the World Economic Forum did, Cyber Polygon. And I briefly touched on that last year, which is their, simulated cyber attack on, the world industries, whatever you want to say it is. And it was interesting. I'm going to cover that real quick.
Cover it, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, sorry. I talked about the super chat.
Oh.
Anyway. But yeah, Cyber Polygon is a basically mock cyber warfare thing that they were doing last year. And I think they did it back in 2019 as well, but they did it in 2020. I initially it was supposed to be done around July of last year, but apparently I guess it took place during their meeting when they were doing the Great Narrative stuff. And so that was one of the things that they're talking about. And a lot of this, it seems like whenever they do a mock situation like what they did with COVID many years ago, you're kind of expecting it to happen again. Like it's like, oh, we're prepping for this thing that's kind of telegraphing that's going to happen pretty soon.
There's you're reminding me of something, Ian. There's a book. I don't know how many years old it is. It's not that. It's like maybe 10 years old. I don't know. My lights are flickering, so hopefully I won't lose power.
Welcome to California.
Yeah, this happened. Just happened last week. The generator's still, up and running. So, by a guy named Jim Rickards, called Currency Wars, and in this book he describes how he participated in something like this. I don't know if this is what it was called, but it was exactly this kind of Department of Defense. How would countries attack each other economically, and how could they attack the U.S. economically? And at the time, he led his team down this path of China and Russia colluding to hoard gold and then dump the U.S. dollar.
Oh, yeah.
And he got kicked out. He got kicked out because they said that would never happen. That's not a realistic scenario. And of course, what's been happening in the last few years, they've both been accruing gold secretly. I mean, we know it, but like, we don't know how much. Right. So it's weird because this kind of stuff is run by bureaucracies that when someone gets up there and talks about the truth of what could actually happen, they're like, no, we don't want to hear that. We want to run other scenarios, not that one. We want to run scenarios that enforce whatever the hell narrative we want to do. Probably ones that say we should print more money or whatever. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So that's actually one thing I called out last year. I'm surprised it didn't happen, which is after the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack, I was fully expecting a lot more massive cyber attacks in 2020, which I honestly had completely forgotten about. And I'm happy it didn't happen, but I'm surprised it didn't. So maybe we'll see some more stuff happen in 2022.
Yeah. It's weird because if we start seeing cyber attacks, this will be my I'll put on my tinfoil hat for this. I'm not going to believe whoever they blame.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I'm not going to believe they'll say China did it or Russia did it or someone, and I'm going to you know what? I'm just not going to believe it. I'm just saying it now. Maybe I'm being rational. I'm not going to believe whoever they say it was that attacked us. I'm not going to believe it.
Yeah, dude. That's a tough one because it's a very good possibility that it could be done, from within.
Well, I mean, what a great way. I mean, keep in mind.
Or the other thing too is they could always proxy it. They could always hire some Russian hackers to do it.
Sure, of course, right? Yeah, but they don't need to. I mean, look, we've got this bloated monstrosity of unelected government that there goes Ian. That needs more.
I'm sorry. I'm like itching my nose. I'm tired of looking myself on screen itching my nose. Sorry.
That's fine. But this bloated entity needs more and more and more and more. And they have massive amount of control. It's just not that far-fetched that they'll be like, hey, well, what if we create a crisis by doing blah, blah, blah? And like, then we'll get this. The politicians because politicians actually don't always do what this bureaucracy wants, because they're kind of pragmatists. They're usually less idealist, and they're much more pragmatists about getting elected and their own saying the right things and virtue signaling, getting on CNN
Lots
and whatever.
Of self-interest involved.
And worse way, you remind me of that movie Wag the Dog.
Yeah.
With the manufactured crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like, we already know, again, not to be conspiracy theorists, but look, these are conspiracies that we know about. We already know countless examples of the CIA doing horrible, horrible things, some of which involved Americans and America, some of which involved other countries that are surreptitious, that are clandestine surreptitious attempts to create false flag or other events to move the needle politically. And look what's happening with freaking January 6th. Today's January 6th. Look what's happening with January 6th. It's worse than 9/11. It's the worst thing since 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. It's like,
oh my God. There's this one thing I retweeted out. It was this picture. I guess it was a video from the candlelight vigil that was set up by Disclosed TV, and I responded, 30 dead in the George Floyd / BLM riots in 2020. No vigil, no congressional hearing.
Right. And no one's been detained for a year in jail without being tried.
No. And remember,
That's
the
part
things
that
that
really is driving me nuts is how all the people are being detained without trial. I'm like,
and you know what the charges are? Criminal trespassing. That's a misdemeanor.
Yeah, I knew it was trespassing. Yeah. When I was like, I was talking, they keep saying about how this is an attack on democracy, an attack on
not treason. Trespassing.
No. And it's like a real attack on everything that America stands for is you guys holding them in prison for more than a year for nearly a year with no trial. That is an assault on everything that you claim to be in support of. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. If the ACLU were even a shadow of what it once was, they would be screaming every night on major news networks about this.
Yeah.
The thing I find really funny about it, I was only aware of like 2 people that died on January 6th. There was the one police officer that they're trying for the longest time saying that he was killed by rioters, which is not the case. The guy had a stroke.
Yep.
And obviously Ashley Babbitt, who was shot by I don't know, police officer, federal agent, whatever. So I was aware of 2, but apparently they said that it was 5 people that died. So yeah, how many people
they count the suicides like months and weeks later.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
That was
they do.
Oh my God.
That's where they're coming from. Yeah.
So even if they didn't stretch the numbers, saying that this is worse than 9/11 or Pearl Harbor is just
so stupid. It's so
crazy.
Insulting. I had one of my coworkers. He's in the UK. He was talking about this. He's like, this stuff is crazy. I mean, he's like, first off, he's like, I'm in Britain. Why the hell are they playing, Biden's speech here? And he's like, he was talking about just how he felt it was so inflammatory. And it's like, he doesn't even live here. And he's basically calling bullshit on this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you see, and it's not just the US, right? Did you see Macron, what he did he called unvaccinated French not citizens. And he basically said they're not citizens and we're going to go after them and make their life hell or whatever.
Well, then Trudeau said that the unvaccinated should not be tolerated, I think was the word he used.
Right. His own Canadian repressive tolerance, but he would do it nicely because he's Canadian. Please, sir, enter your padded cell. Here's your the concentration camps will have fresh maple syrup every day. They'll be fine.
They'll be lovely by the beach, in Australia. There will be relaxation camps.
Yeah, there'll be relaxation camps.
All right.
I'm sorry.
I got another stream I need to do in 30 minutes, so we should probably start wrapping things up.
You're in charge. I just showed up. I hope I didn't.
That's cool, man. That's cool. I appreciate you jumping on, man. I think it was great. As funny, I was telling Alex beforehand, I was concerned about streaming by myself because I'm a terrible conversationalist with myself, and eventually I'll get to the point where I'm done. I can't talk anymore. It'll be a short stream.
I've been doing that on Wednesday nights, and it's a challenge because I'm like, I know I have stuff to get through, but I'm still like, there's no one to save me when I stop for a minute and have a brain fart. It's like, the silence is just there. It's only me.
With the learning disability, I hate reading articles by myself because there's no one there to correct me or say, okay, that word is this.
Right.
It's pretty funny, man. Whenever I do a video for Unsafe Space, or even for my channel, it's sometimes I want to release the behind the scenes stuff of how I fuck things up when I'm recording because I think it'd be great comedy.
Sure.
But yeah.
Oh, I've done that. I used to do a lot of reviews, and I would do voiceover and then put images to them. And there were a couple of times where I could not say this thing. So there's 5 minutes of me trying to say the word indistinct. I still can't say that word.
There's certain words I have. Oh.
And I'm like,
I will be going through multiple paragraphs, and I'll hit a word, and I'm like, nah, 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 nah. And I blow the take.
Maybe we should make an outtakes thing for the subscribers on and put it on Discord or somewhere.
They probably love it.
Yeah.
Watch Ian have problems saying words. Oh, it's even worse now. I don't have the Invisalign in right now, which is the reason why I'm, not slurring everything like I normally have been doing for like the last couple of weeks, which I need to actually put in pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, it just like anytime I record a video, I gotta take the thing out, or it's like it's just I can't talk. It's great. It's great for live streams. It makes everybody laugh. The fact that I can't say certain syllables, but yeah. Anyway, I was hoping there'd be more Q&A because that was what got me to want to do a live, live stream, live video. A live stream is that people wanted to do some Q&A, and we got one question. So I had fun doing this. It
always happens that way, man. People are like, you need to do Q&A, or you need to do this, that, and then you do it, and like 4 people respond to it. And it's like, well, I guess I didn't need to do that.
Yeah. Bungalow Logic, Comix Division. See if you can get Carter to grift his way onto F&T this week, riding Carrie's coattails. Yeah, dude, you should come on F&T.
I would go on, but I don't know. If they invite me on Friday Night Tights, I'll go on Friday Night Tights. I'll be bad at talking about
pop culture.
Some pop culture I'm fine at, but like, comic books probably I'll have, but I have my Mandalorian thing behind me and Gorton Plateau. I'm a little bit of a nerd, and my Firefly thing, and it's okay.
I love Firefly. Have you been watching the Book of Boba Fett?
I haven't.
It's trash. Don't.
Oh,
okay, good.
I'm not a fan of Disney. Not because I want to be a Disney hater, but it's like I'm probably one of the few people that has been very critical of Mandalorian. I found it to be mediocre. And
I liked it because I was comparing it to all of the previous Star Wars that have happened, except for the ones in my childhood.
Yeah,
and by that standard, it was okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was safe, but it was, in my opinion, it's pretty mediocre. And it for what I was expecting, which was about this bounty hunter going through the galaxy hunting people, we didn't get a lot of that. So expectations subverted.
Fair enough. I had no expectations, so I was like. I'm going to watch, we had Disney Plus for some reason for a month or whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this and I assume it's going to be like a cesspool of woke crap. And I was like, oh,
well, I mean, it kind of is.
It's okay. I was like, it's all right. Like
it's more subtle. There are patterns I picked up. I've literally watched every series with the exception of the Bad Batch. And there's definitely certain patterns I've picked up. Which is, lady bosses.
Well, I miss Firefly. That's all.
Lady bosses.
Yeah, it's in everything. And they have multiple lady bosses, and women.
I am so sick of the woman in charge trope. Like,
it's the other thing too, which is I always harp on because I like talking about sexual dimorphism because it's a thing. Is that the 90-pound woman taking out the 200-pound man? That always makes me laugh.
At least they cast someone who actually could kick my ass.
Chrono, right? Absolutely. It's like I totally buy that. It's like here's the thing. I always have to point this out because people want to label you as sexist when you point this stuff out. It's like I'm 5'9". Okay, I'm not the biggest man around. There's definitely bigger dudes out there, and a woman kicking his ass is just as believable of me kicking the guy's ass, which is not going to happen.
Right.
And that's the reason why I take martial arts. Yes, a woman can defeat a male larger than him doing certain things, but that requires training.
Right. And she has to be better trained than he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, their skill levels can't match. Hers has to be far and above his for that skill to matter. Because if they match, well, then his more body weight, longer reach, more physical strength is going to crush her no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
It's the reason why you wouldn't ever a man abuses a woman. It's obviously more devastating. But when a female attacks a man or is abusing a man, either they're using a weapon like a frying pan or something, or if they are just punching and kicking whatnot, they're not going to be, the man is not going to be as physically harmed as if it was the other way around. So.
Yep.
Yeah. But whatever.
It doesn't make it any less wrong, though.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's something that it never gets pointed out. It's like it's one thing I've heard, and I don't have the stats to back it up. I've always heard this, is that there's actually more abuse of men by women, but because the brutality is far less than a man beating on a woman, it doesn't get talked about as much.
Yeah, and the cops don't care about it.
Yeah,
they don't report it as much. They don't have shelters to go to. They don't have support in the court systems
not allowed to have them.
or
That's why.
From the law. This is a subject I could go on for about forever, and I did research it. And one of the things is that if a man calls the cops because of abuse, the rate at which there's the dual arrest goes up 300%.
Mm-hmm.
So if a woman were to call, it's like 3 times less likely that she would also be arrested. And that's ridiculous.
The one thing that you point out is the whole thing with shelters is the fact that there is no men's shelter. When there was an attempt several years ago at setting up a men's shelter, and it was closed down by feminists. It's pretty disgusting, but yeah.
Well, as someone in chat points out, you can just identify as a woman now, and you're in. So
yeah, well, yeah, that was years ago before all that, man. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, and then also the thing is, though, is that some women's shelters won't let women bring their teenage sons.
Yeah, well, I understand.
Some women don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they like the problem though is that like women are not leaving if they have a teenage son because they don't want to leave their teenage son with their abusive spouse. Because
that's fair. That's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, you got to find a place for those kids too. They're still minors.
Yeah. All right. On that note, I guess we should wrap things up. No, I mean, it's like I said, I got my own live stream in 17 minutes. I didn't think we'd be going this long, but we did.
We shouldn't keep you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you should go do your thing.
Yeah, it's been a crazy day. So thanks everyone who showed up. I know that this is typically a little smaller than the typical Carrie Carter stream, but I do appreciate everyone coming out. Thank you, Alex, for hopping on with me because I would be floundering by myself. And I don't think people would be as entertained. And thanks, Carter, for you jumping on too. That was great.
It was fun to see in Discord. I was like, oh, cool. He's doing a live stream. Sure. So yeah, thanks for doing it.
I think I'll make a point of maybe doing that once a month, talking about the Great Reset stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. So cool. All right. How do you guys typically do your outros? You talk about.
You have to tell Beverly to run the credits because she's not really good at figuring out when to do it.
No, I wasn't sure if you guys talk about where they could find you. Yeah, I like, hey, this is Carter. He's on Twitter. You can follow him here. You can find him on Unsafe Space. And then there's Alex.
I don't think they do it like a mall, though.
No, that's just me being silly. You don't like my North Atlantic
however
accent?
you want.
Accent,
Remind people to follow you and subscribe and all that stuff. I don't know, whatever you want to do. It's your show, man.
All right. Follow everybody here on the panel. You probably already are. So if you haven't seen my content over at the Comix Division channel, you can go check me out there, where I basically these days have just been taking massive crap on Disney shows. But I try and talk about pop culture and occasional politics and keep the Great Reset stuff over here. But it occasionally makes its way into a stream because of ESG. We talk about that on occasion. But it's Thursday. Tonight, we're going to be talking about pop culture and just some of the crazy stuff over there. And Alex, do you have a Twitter?
I was banned from Twitter in July.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I've had a getter since July, but I got it before I got banned from Twitter, actually. But I have a YouTube channel, Alex of All Trades, all one word, mostly gaming. And then I have a locals, Alex of All Trades, where I mostly do book reviews. And I'm on every social media platform but Twitter. So you can find me as Alex Miceli or Alex of All Trades.
All right. And of course, there's Carter.
And there's me. I'm mostly
Enough said. Roll credits. Don't Sorry, go ahead. Plug it if there's anything to plug.
I mean, there's nothing to plug. Subscribe to Unsafe Space, and I don't know. You're already here. So
yeah, hopefully you subscribe.
Support the show, share the show, tell everyone Ian's awesome. I don't know, whatever you want to do.
All right. Good night, everyone. Bev, hit those credits.
Thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, we have a deep content library that includes interviews with everyone from Mike Cernovich to Megan Murphy, so go check it out. If you'd like to see more, please consider supporting the show by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on all the major social media platforms, at least for now, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space chat on Telegram. See you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production has not been authorized by Dr. Fauci. All praise be to his name. The following co-conspirators have been asking too many questions. You know what to do. Once the Maxwell trial is over, we promise there will be no more pedophiles among the ruling class. Just one more jab to combat the Zeta variant. Oops, I mean the Omicron variant. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.